This is Dateline News and Conversation. The topic tonight: will Armenia lose its sovereignty? My guest tonight, she's a good friend. She's in Yerevan, Armenia, Natalya Saghiyan. Natalya, welcome back to the show.
It's
I
good to
have been,
be here again.
thank you so much. I have been paying attention uh, to what little news we get about Armenia here. And of course, my sources are not your sources. But there are three things that I want to discuss with you. Uh, and the two of the things we've touched on before, but it's now several weeks and months. The first thing is, as many of our viewers will remember, there were, I think, over 100,000, maybe more, people who were forced to leave Nagorno Karabakh and come to Armenia. Natalia, I'd like to know, have they all been settled? Do they have homes? Do they have jobs? Um, are they causing any problems? Natalia, bring us up to date on what's going on with those poor people that had to leave their homes.
Well, the official number of those who had to leave their homes from Artsakh and move to Armenia was 106,000 people. Considering those who left Artsakh after the 44-day war in 2020, altogether there was a population of about 145,000 people in Artsakh, and now there is zero Armenians living there. Those who moved to Armenia, I would like to remind that all this uh, exodus actually lasted only for 3 or 4 days. Just imagine this many people leaving their homes within 4 days. It was really a disaster. Whoever remained in Armenia, now, well, some of them left for Russia, some European states, some even are settled in the United States, but these are very small numbers. So the official statistics is as following. About 70,000 of them found jobs. Some were hired by state authorities, such as policemen, people who served in the army, in the National Security Service. Some of them were hired by these state authorities. Some of them just found any job they could find because they had to pay the rent. Up till now, Armenian government is still thinking about a system, how to organize a system to provide money for these people to purchase their own houses or buy land and get money from the state to build houses on the land that they can purchase. But the situation is very unhealthy because the state's propaganda through mass media, which is not directly related to Pashinyan's regime, but we all know that they are sponsored from the government. They spread a lot of propaganda against people of Artsakh. It looks like they are trying to force these people to leave Armenia because these people are a potential threat for Pashinyan. Because whenever we have any activity, protest in the street, people of Artsakh are there because they do understand that the one and only person responsible for this situation where they had to leave their homes and their churches and their graves of their families is Nicole Pashinyan, who on October 6th of 2022 went to Prague and recognized territorial integrity of Azerbaijan, including Artsakh and Lachin corridor. And after that, Azerbaijan said, okay, if this is my territory, I can do whatever I want to. And in autumn last year, they started the so-called anti-terror operation in Artsakh. So 70,000, according to state statistics, are provided with jobs. All children were placed at schools. That's no question about that. We did have shortage of school books for them. But for example, in the class of my youngest daughter, there are five, no, six. children from Artsakh, and the school was not able to provide books you cannot find them in bookshops. And we provided these children with books so that they can finish the grade that they joined. But the situation, as I said, is very unhealthy. Some of them were not able to find proper accommodation and have to live with many people in one bedroom apartment because it suddenly prices went up. Now it's leveling down a little bit, and people are able to, separate in smaller families to live in probably better conditions. But it is still very difficult because prices in Armenia are much higher than they are used to have in Artsakh, and salaries in Armenia are lower than they used to have in Artsakh. So there is this economic difficulty for them, obviously, which is not being settled in any way by the government. Even though Madam Samantha Power, who rushed to the city of Goris, where all Artsakis settled for about 2 weeks before they were able to move anywhere else in Armenia. That's on the border with Artsakh. She went there and she promised them that the U.S. will provide funding and everything. I don't know if the funding actually was provided to the government of Republic of Armenia, but Nikol Pashinyan and his cabinet continuously complain that at the moment we don't have the resources to provide needs of all people from Artsakh. So we're waiting for developments. Some of them were provided with certificates, which are equivalent to money, but they do not get money as such. They get a certificate for a certain amount of money, which they can use to purchase accommodation. But the mechanism, how is the certificate going to work if you want to purchase a piece of property from somebody who owns the property and he says, no, I don't want this piece of paper, give me money. So there is no mechanism for that. And banks are still wondering how is it going to work, and the whole system is very raw, and I don't see that our government is eager to solve it. I think they are acting in a very laid back and relaxed way to see if they can force people from Artsakh to leave.
Well, thank you for that update. It's really unbelievable. I mean, 130 or 40,000 people forced into refugee status to find accommodation, to find jobs, put their children in schools. It sounds to me like your country has done at least a decent job in terms of that. I'd like to remind our viewers, first of all, that Natalya is a member of an opposition party in Armenia, of which there are a few. So she's a very involved woman. So I just wanted to make that clear. The second thing I want to ask you, Natalya, I know there's a lot of political unrest. Is it a prime minister or a president?
Prime Minister.
He's the prime minister. He's upset a lot of people.
Yes.
Have there been protests of any kind, any large protest? Because I know when we talked before, you said many of the people in Armenia seem to be confused. They don't know really what's going on. The propaganda internally has been really tremendous. So what's the situation? Is there a lot of unrest, especially in the capital? Well, I should say not only in the capital, but throughout the country.
We did have several weeks of enormous, tremendous, huge protests with this movement Tavush for homeland, which started in Tavush region of Armenia, where Prime Minister Pashinyan surrendered 4 villages just at one demand of Azerbaijan, because as Azerbaijan claimed, these villages were populated by Azeris in Soviet time. So for some strange logic, which is understandable only for President Aliyev and Prime Minister Pashinyan, these villages had to be returned, as Azerbaijan says, official Baku says, to Azerbaijan. But in fact, these villages, even in Soviet times, have never been a part of Azerbaijan.
Uh-oh.
For violating the constitution of Armenia, what they decided to do is they decided to convince the population of these villages that this land is not theirs. This land has never been an Armenian territory. So they have to move out of their houses, forget for the fields that they have planted wheat or any other, whatever they do in the agricultural activity. Forget about it because all these territories are being now surrendered to Azerbaijan. And this, uh, uh, of course, many people were upset, not only in these four villages, because today the situation is that Azerbaijan controls a significant part of interstate road going from Iran through Armenia to Georgia and further to the Black Sea and to border with Russia. So after 44-day war, we surrendered 21 kilometer of road from Goris to Kapan. This is in the southeast of Armenia, very close to border with Iran. So today, in fact, Azerbaijan is already controlling two segments of that road, which is very dangerous situation because Russia is now building the north-south trade road, a large road where China has invested and India invested and Iran invested. So I think that Azerbaijan is being forced by its Western masters to gain control over certain segments of that road for further purposes of whatever provocations they may think of. So this all obviously upset a lot of people, and especially the Reverend Father of Tavush region, the head of Armenian Apostolic Church in Tavush. It is the highest rank of a priest for a region. Bagrat, we call him Bagrat Sarpazan, so Reverend Father Bagrat. Bagrat is his name which he received after getting his rank in a church. So it's not his secular name. And he actually initiated these protests. The first, his goal was, the goal of this protest was to stop this process because Armenian regime called it demarcation and delimitation process, but it was nothing of the kind because we all know that there is a huge document elaborated by the OSCE regarding demarcation and delimitation process, especially for the CIS countries. And there is a very clear procedure that before starting the process on the spot in the field, the main principles of general delimitation and demarcation process had to be agreed between the sides, between the parties. But nothing like this happened. We don't have any document signed between Armenia and Azerbaijan regarding the principles of how are we going to set the border between the two countries. What Azerbaijan is pushing forward, and the West is supporting it, that for each part of the border, we're going to work out separate principles, which is a huge violation of international law. And of course, it is very bad for Armenia. So firstly, protests started with this goal to stop this process because people are literally being thrown out of their houses. Of course, Nikol Pashinyan visited the region for several times. He promised a lot of money. He said, don't worry, we will give you remuneration for the property that you lose. But when it's going to happen, nobody knows. And people already have planted certain things on the fields that they have. And now all this territory is controlled by Azerbaijani border control. So people can basically not reach the fields where they have planted something that they were supposed to harvest later on and sell. These people only do agriculture. They don't do anything else. They do not fix cars. Their profession is agriculture. And the protest started from there. So Bagrat and several followers, which became, for number of followers, of course, increased in the course of the protest. He walked all the way from the village of Kirans to Yerevan, which took him a little over 2 weeks. He walked, literally walked by foot to Yerevan. And the final of this movement, the final spot was reaching Yerevan on May 9th, which is an important date. Not only it's a victory day, just like in Russia, for us it is also a victory day for the first Artsakh war, when we liberated the city of Shushi and forced Azerbaijan to sign the ceasefire. That was in 1994. So it was a symbolic day. And on that day, on the Republic Square, even the official statistics showed that there were a little over 100,000 people. Just imagine the size of the protest. And it lasted for several weeks. The last protest was on the 12th of June, when police used the sound and light grenades, I don't know how you call it in English, which they throw to the crowd so that they disperse. Well, lots of people got hurt. Lots of people had burns on their legs and hands. One man even lost his wrist, like he was totally cut off by the blast, because first of all, the policemen were not trained well enough to use these things, these special means that they used against protesters. And then we have discovered several pieces left of those grenades, and we saw that they're out of date. So that was the last day of big protests. The movement declared that they're going to reorganize and start protests again in September, especially that the parliament is on vacation now, so it makes no sense to do whatever they plan to do. The thing is that Armenia, as a parliamentary republic, has certain limitations in terms of how can you remove a prime minister of his post. You can do two things: either to impeach him, and the second possibility is if the parliament doesn't approve the cabinet that the prime minister is proposing for them to approve. So we leave the cabinet case alone, and the impeachment is a difficult process because the opposition in the parliament now, they do not have enough votes even to sign the petition for it to be included in the agenda, because the ruling party has constitutional majority. The opposition is so outnumbered that they cannot even sign the petition to enter the impeachment issue into the agenda of the parliament. It's a very difficult situation. In fact, this constitution was written for normal times, normal situation, when a prime minister is a decent person who resigns when he does something so wrong or so badly, like it happened, for example, in Austria several years ago. Prime minister resigned just because one yellow newspaper published some material where allegedly he was acting inappropriately. Nothing was even proven. It never even reached the court. But the person was so decent that he resigned because his name was, he was put in jeopardy. So in reality, it's a very good constitution, but not for this situation. And this is the problem. And everybody knows it. And Pashinyan knows it, that protests, usually what they say is, you don't have enough people in the streets to manifest that people of Armenia do not agree with what we're doing. But on 9th of May, and in between, from 9th of May to 12th of June, there were days when we also had nearly 100,000 people in the street. So the number of protesters doesn't really matter, because you have a regime who was brought to power for certain mission to be accomplished, and this mission is not accomplished yet. And this mission is an agenda pushed forward by the West and initiated by the United States. And the primary, the first number one point of this agenda is to open the so-called Zangezur corridor, which would be a corridor between Nakhichevan, which is an exclave of Azerbaijan bordering with Turkey. So it's locked between Armenia and Turkey, and the motherland of Azerbaijan. The thing is that on the paper that was signed by between Armenia and Azerbaijan with Russian mediation on 9th of November 2020, there was also a clause about a road, not a corridor. The difference is that when we speak about the road, it means that everything that goes along that road is checked by custom control on both ends. And when we speak about corridor, which Azerbaijan and Turkey and the West are pushing forward, it is a corridor which is an exterritorial corridor for Armenia. So Armenia has no control over. And the people who will watch this show, I want them to understand why is this happening. Because the collective West at the moment has no logistics to reach the Central Asian states. And this is their primary goal, to open a corridor so that they can move, let's say, certain types of cargo that they need in the Central Asian republics to destabilize situation over there, including mercenaries, terrorists. I know we do not use this word, but this is the truth. And certain other types of cargo, including military, which they cannot move to Central Asia at the moment. This is the situation. They want to make Armenia a transit country to move all that stuff to Central Asia to destabilize both Russia and China. So protests are, assumably, they're going to start again in September when the parliament returns to its normal duties. But situation is very dangerous because there are elections upcoming in the United States, and we remember that that 44-day war was unleashed by Azerbaijan again during the pre-election period in the United States. I know that there is a concept in politology which is called October surprise, that all major problematic situations in the world get initiated immediately before the elections in the United States, because the United States are busy with the elections and the entire world is watching the pre-electoral process in the United States. So when you want to do something nasty, you do it before the elections in the United States.
I think we had a delay there, Natalya. Your image froze. Come on. Please don't do this.
And now we're back.
Oh, okay.
We
You
lost
were at
internet for a moment.
you were at the point of using the elections in the United States as a time to
Yes.
for different countries to go about doing things clandestinely, doing things illegal, doing things evil.
Yeah.
Now, talking about the United States and the interference of other countries, I noticed and I learned when we visited Armenia, the visible presence of the United States. There's the American University, huge university on the side of a hill. It's been there for many, many years. It's become known that the United States has been using soft power, money, donated to political entities, donated to politicians, NGOs, media, all to create an American presence there, increase American influence. I want you to tell me now. Samantha Power came there last year and supposedly promised lots and lots of money. She was and is an evil person. When she was the United States ambassador to the United Nations. Uh, for
Hmm.
me, it was one of the most embarrassing performances that she did uh, over 4 years while she was there. So it's obvious the United States is meddling and has been meddling in the affairs of your country. Uh,
Hmm.
I I read where, and you can correct me if I don't pronounce this properly. Uh, the United States is trying to become militarily involved. Are they trying to attract Armenia to come into NATO? Tell me what's going on with that. To me, that's a tremendous violation of Armenian sovereignty. What are your thoughts on that?
Of course, nobody is inviting us to join NATO. It's just a joke. But the Pashinyan's regime, sometimes they use these fake, fake agendas like Armenia joining NATO or potentially and joining the EU and all of that, just to enforce the anti-Russian propaganda. Uh, but obviously, nobody is waiting for us, nor in NATO, neither in the EU. But the United States are building up their presence in Armenia, particularly just today, the military drill called Partner Eagle 2024 ended in Armenia between the US and Armenian military forces. This is not the first time this drill is happening. Of course, it was happening before too, because we are a part of Eastern Partnership. I think it's a program of NATO to involve the CIS countries, not irritating Russia that much. But that was before the color revolution in Armenia. Now they are doing it also with the purpose to irritate Russia as much as they can. But the tricky thing about this particular military drill was that it was a drill for peacekeepers. Um Traditionally, when Armenia sends peacekeepers, we were largely represented in Kosovo and in Afghanistan. We once went to Syria in 2018, but it was yet another démarche against Russia because Russia always directly asked Armenia not to get involved in Syria. For some strange reason, after Nikol Pashinyan became prime minister, first thing he did send Armenian peacekeepers to Syria. But it was just one time, so disregard that. But in other two cases, and now we're not in Afghanistan anymore, but we're still represented in Kosovo, Armenian peacekeepers. And the only three military professions which are represented in peacekeeping missions in Kosovo are medics, um, sappers, right? I'm saying the word right, the ones that work with mines, and drivers. But this time, they were also working with other professions which are not named in the official press release. And they are working skills, how to behave in case of mass protests. Now tell me, why would an army learn how to act in the situation when there are street protests? Obviously, that even according to Constitution of the Republic of Armenia, our armed forces are absolutely under no circumstances can interfere into political processes, and it's absolutely illegal and forbidden. So our point of view is that Pashinyan is preparing for some for other painful um, steps for Armenia in terms of surrendering something else, which is going to happen sometime soon. And he needs to reinforce police with the army. This is why they are teaching Armenian soldiers to go against their own people. This is what I'm thinking. This is my opinion. And several other opposition representatives also share my opinion. And the recent news was that the United States is going to have its representative appointed at the Ministry of Defense of the Republic of Armenia. As it was written in the press release, was that the person is going to deal with human rights, I don't know, strengthening role of women in the army, etc., etc. But I don't think that it is acceptable for an independent country to have a person representing a third country uh, having an official position in the Ministry of Defense of your country. Because obviously, we can have a very, very legitimate concern that what this person is going to do is going to try to destabilize the unified system of defense that we still have with Armenia and Russia from inside. Of course, it's very dangerous. And this is an utterly legitimate concern that we're having here. So these two facts, this drill, the last drill that they had with peacekeepers, and presence of this person in the Ministry of Defense of Republic of Armenia, already make me think that this is not going to end. Of course, the propaganda, as you mentioned, is being vastly supported by the United States. Only for this year, they have allocated $17 million for mass media, for democratic mass media. So that means the propaganda tool will be used over and over again, as they used to do for decades. You mentioned American University. Yes, the first thing that soft power is doing, they're infiltrating the educational system. And today in Armenia, we already have a generation of teachers, university lecturers who are totally into liberal or ultra-liberal values, and they are teaching the next generation. You see, if you want to control the country in a globalist way, you have to turn it into a corporation. And how you do it? You take away the national identity and you put the country into debt so that it's financially dependent on you. Full stop. You have a corporation which is totally dependent. And this is now what's happening with Armenia. We've seen that happening with the Baltic states, and now they are totally dependent on the European Union, which means also on the United States. They had one nuclear power plant for the three Baltic states, which was more than sufficient to provide them with electricity. And one of the conditions for them to become an EU member state was to shut that down. And now they're totally dependent on the European Union. And anytime when they do not show proper anti-Russian behavior, they start getting blackouts, because this is just a way of, punishing those who misbehave. And now America is also, the United States are offering us modular nuclear power plants, and they're slowly moving towards the idea of closing the Metsamor nuclear power plant that we have, that was built in Soviet times, and it has worked perfectly all these years. And now Armenia is in close cooperation with Rosatom, that's the Russian nuclear agency, and they are providing all the necessary equipment and technical support and follow up and everything, and training for Armenian specialists who work at the nuclear power plant. Turkey has been trying to shut it down for decades and never succeeded. But today, with the support of the United States, I fear that probably they can reach the goal. But it's not because they are afraid that there will be a nuclear incident at that power plant, but because they want to push Russia out of the region, regardless consequences for Armenian people. This is the only goal that they have, to limit influence of Russia and Iran in South Caucasus, preferably to bring it down to zero. Even if it causes a lot of suffering and pain for people living in the region, particularly for Armenian people, nobody cares. This much about the United States building up its influence.
Well, that's what the United States has been doing all over the world for a long, long time, and you articulated it very well. The goal of America, and I wish that all the Armenian people could understand and realize this, is to isolate Armenia from Russia and to provide more instability, more threats right on Russia's border. That's the goal. That's always been the goal. And, as you look across Europe, you look across Eastern Europe, the former Soviet republics, Many of them now are members of NATO. They've been
Hmm.
turned away from Russia for decades and decades and
Yes.
have been taught to hate Russia. Um, as an
Hmm.
American, it's very upsetting for me to see this happen, and for me to see it happen in your country, which I love and I visited. Um, and I met many of your compatriots. Um, I would like to know this. My last question for you, Natalya. Do you think that the people of Armenia feel hostility towards Russia? I know many of you speak Russian. What's
Yes.
the feeling of the people towards Russia? Do they hate Russia? Are they fearful? Are they mistrustful of Russia? What's the feeling of the people?
Well, um, for, for ordinary people, like at the moment, we have many people from Russia who moved to Armenia after the special military operation started, and the population of Armenia is, accepted them very friendly. No problems at all. Like I follow the media, and I almost do not see any situations when a person from Russia who moved to Armenia, or even just a tourist, would be, I don't know, treated badly or in any criminal records. Very rarely, very rarely. But if we talk about the Russian Federation as a state, who which was traditionally being perceived in Armenia, and actually is, even on paper, a strategic um, ally of Armenia, it's not the same anymore. The attitude toward the Russian Federation as a state is not the same, because the propaganda sponsored by largely by the United States had done its job, and now Russia as a state, even the statistics shows, they run this regular researches, and it shows that Russia is no longer being perceived as number one friend of Armenia. France is now number one, which is a big surprise. Not surprise. It's ridiculous, because what even if we manage to purchase any, I don't know, weapon from France, it is such a problem. There's no logistic to get it to Armenia. That's one. And second, I'm very doubtful about it, because if you purchase weapons, you do not run talking to all, announcing about it all over the world. Usually, these kind of things are kept silent before until the weapon is produced and is already moving towards your country. So if we look at the news, and we see that, Armenia signed an agreement to buy this and this and that from France, I don't know how much we can be trusted. But research shows that now population of Armenia, over 50% of population of Armenia, do not see Russia as friend number one. Now France is friend number one, and only then Russia. It's in some periods, for example, in September 21, when Azerbaijan initiated another armed, situation in Jermuk, and they moved forward towards the city of Jermuk, and now they are only 1 kilometer away, and we had over 200 casualties there. um, Again, the state propaganda immediately accused Russia of not the Russia, but the Common Security Treaty Organization, which is associated with Russia. When we say the CSTO, we mean Russia. I mean, people understand Russia. So they did not protect us, they did not help us, and all these sort of accusations. Even very recently, the secretary of the Security Council of Armenia, I mean, he's not just a random guy, he's the secretary of the Security Council of Armenia, directly accused Russia for surrendering Artsakh. Basically, he said Russia made friends with Armenia, promised us support, and in the end came to our region to surrender Artsakh to Azerbaijan, and now they are gone, and we're left alone with all our problems directly. So this is just another step towards, ruining the traditional security system with Russia, which is vital for Armenia. Because nobody is offering us directly to replace Russia in Armenia, not the EU, not the United States. Nobody says, at the moment Russia moves out of Armenia, we move in and we protect you from the threats. The only country, the only neighbor that we have now that directly opposes this Zangezur corridor is Iran. Iran is even directly speaking very strict to Azerbaijan, saying that we will not tolerate any changes of the geopolitical situation in the region. So forget about the corridor. But unfortunately, the propaganda did its job. So the resources that we are having, like our party and the movement for, Friends of Russia and several other political forces which are oriented towards Russia, not because we are, they accuse us of being, it's called gubernist, like we want Armenia to become just a part of Russia, a region of Russia. No, nothing of the kind. But we do understand that our future objectively is with Russia, because United States are very far. Europe, we don't even know if the EU is going to stay, because the situation in EU is changing so rapidly that now liberals are no longer represented in a majority in the European Parliament, because the right forces actually took power in European Parliament. Macron, his chair is shaking under him. Olaf Scholz is also in a very shaky situation. And these are the two founding states of the European Union. So we don't know if this European Union as we know it lasts for longer than the end of this year. We don't know. And all people like Charles Michel, Joseph Borrell, and several other bureaucrats from European Union who actually were tapping Nicole Pashinyan on the shoulder and saying, yeah, you do what Aliyev says, don't worry, we will protect you. They're all off their positions now, so they do not hold their offices anymore. The new people are on the way. And Armenia is indeed left alone because we behaved very badly towards Russia. And of course, Russian officials are also reading these statistics, the researches that are being organized in Armenia, for example, by the Gallup Society, which is a world-known statistical agency. And they see that the attitude towards Russia is not the same. So they probably are also correcting their attitude towards Armenia based on that. So this is nothing good for Armenia.
Well, Natalya, I want to thank you once again for coming on, and you're obviously really on top of things. You've really articulated the situation very, very clearly. I don't think anybody could have a difficult time understanding it. Your passion for your country and its sovereignty is obvious. And I just hope that this is one more instance, one more bit of evidence and proof of what the United States is trying to do all over the world. Number one, to attack Russia, destabilize Russia if they can, and to increase its imperialistic domination over the rest of the planet. So thank you so much. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you. The pleasure is all mine.